if there's any positive to how horrible the age we're living in is, perhaps the Overton window has
Yeah,
shifted on both sides so that we can, if
totally.
if the Dems get back into power, we can do something meaningful. But I do worry that as the disparities get larger and larger and the pace of technological change speeds up, the differentiation between the winners and the losers is just more and more extreme. And the only way to regulate that in some ways is to put a cap on sort
Yeah,
of wealth, right, at some point,
yeah.
or it just continues and gets worse and worse with each passing day.
Hello and welcome to Why Is This Happening with me, your host, Chris Hayes. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that we are kind of living in a real golden age of scams, of get rich quick schemes, of quick money, of all kinds of quackery and cultural messages being sent to people all the time, increasingly, I think, particularly to young men, although not exclusively, about how you can, from your phone, enter some portal in which you magically make a ton of money very quickly. And that actually, that's really kind of the one place that you can get ahead anymore. Like, nothing really else works. You're not going to be able to get ahead through, traditional hard work or getting an education. And, maybe AI is going to wipe out every career anyway. But what there is like, there's like sitting on your phone, there's like like 4 sports book apps that you can bet on, sports events. There's at least 2 different futures markets where you can bet on everything from like the weather to whether the US is going to like drop a nuclear weapon, which good luck collecting on that one, by the way. And then and the kind of genesis of all this before the ubiquity of sports gambling and now gambling on events was the crypto boom, is crypto. Like, before you could trade these things in your phone, you could trade the electronic currency. First Bitcoin, then Ethereum, then a whole bunch of others, including Dogecoin and Fartcoin and Penguin Coin and on and on and on. And we have covered crypto on this program a number of times, trying to kind of poke and prod at it. What is it? Is it real? Is it not? I think its realness has kind of revealed itself increasingly. I think when I started years ago trying to figure this out, I was a little more like, well, maybe there's something here. I don't know. Sort of, it's genuinely interesting technology. They actually did make this thing that kind of works to keep track of who has these things in the blockchain. But there's a fantastic new documentary out about crypto. It's called "Everyone Is Lying to You for Money," that really, really captures, maybe better than anything I've seen, this kind of frenzied sense of kind of predatory scam and hype that has not just surrounded crypto as a specific thing, but has become, like, to me, a dominant cultural force in American life and in American political life. I think that's unquestionably part of what got Donald Trump elected in 2024. It's the vector right now by which the Trump family is making most of their money through big crypto plays. And the film stars, it's a documentary. The director and sort of star of it is Ben McKenzie, who's a very well-known actor. You might recognize him from The OC or Southland. He's been in a bunch of things. He's also a undergraduate economics major, as he reminds you in the film. It's called "Everyone Is Lying to You for Money." I really, really highly recommend this film, which is a great sort of intro to crypto and scams, but also just a super fun 90 minutes. Not a thing that you could always say about documentaries. And so I'm super psyched to have Ben here on Why Is This Happening? Ben, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris.
Is this your first documentary?
Yeah.
Why? Why make a
Yeah.
doc?
Yeah. Question I ask myself all the time, every day. I started with the book, actually. I
The book is called Easy Money, right?
Yeah, book's called Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud, which is, to your intro, exactly what we're talking about, this golden age of fraud. It was the pandemic. A friend of mine came to me and said I should buy Bitcoin. Crypto was everywhere. It was in the news. Celebrities were hawking it. And my buddy was like, you've got to buy Bitcoin. but my buddy had given me terrible financial advice before. Dave.
You're
Uh,
lucky, by the way, that your introduction was the vector of Dave, who had given you a stock tip that didn't pan out. Because I feel
yes.
like it properly colored the advice from the jump.
Yeah. And the other thing that Dave was really into in the mid aughts, you were a similar age, I think, online gambling,
Oh
online
yeah.
poker
Oh
was
yeah.
becoming a thing where you could actually gamble with real money. And Dave was really into that. And I remember Dave asking Dave at the time, like, because I would have games at my house. I was single. I was living in LA, and I literally, I hate to admit it, but I had a poker table in my house, and I was instead of a dining room table, I had a poker table, and and but this was different because you were sending your money somewhere else, and I was like, Dave, where are you sending the money? And he's like, oh yeah, that's a good, and they were
Costa Rica, it turned out.
yeah, it was the Caribbean islands,
Right.
the same Caribbean islands where the crypto exchanges were then
Yes, right.
domiciled years later. So it all stunk to heaven, and I was just like, I don't know. I couldn't let go of it. Once I became fascinated by it, I have always been interested in economics, but the behavioral side of economics. I'm not very good at math, so that sort of prevented me from what you think of as economics. What people think of is this sort of dry mathematical science, but if economics is the study of how humans relate to each other in this thing called the economy, you really need to understand human beings and all of their, not just the good things about them, but all of the irrational behavior and scamming and defrauding. And so this just sort of hit this perfect vector for me, or perfect combination of boredom and malaise, economic interest, and then a love of true crime. I just love true crime, and particularly what I like to call stupid crime, where the criminals are like obviously committing crimes, sometimes via tweet, and like turning on each other after they get discovered, and Cohen Brothers S crime. So crypto had tons of that. I just became obsessed. So I reached out to I decided I want to write a book. I took an edible, decided I wanted to write a book, realized I didn't know how to write a book, reached out to a journalist named Jacob Silverman, who had written an article called the title of which was "Even Donald Trump Knows Bitcoin is a Scam,"
Hmm.
which is interesting nowadays to look back on, and invited Jacob to drinks at a local Brooklyn bar and pitched him on this idea of like, hey, I know it's going to the moon right now, but it's going to crash, and what if we like reported on this and wrote a book about it? And he was going on paternity leave, so my timing was good. We started writing articles about it, and we kind of just got lucky in terms of the timing. We started reporting in real life in 2022, and I just decided to turn a camera on. It was very, very much just that. We were at South by Southwest, the big music tech film festival in my hometown of Austin, and it was our first venture into the real world. And I asked my agent, "Hey, can you find me a guy with a camera and a sound pack in Austin?" We walk onto the floor of the convention center in Austin, and I see this booth for a company called Celsius, which I knew about because it was offering people this crazy guaranteed return on their money if they just gave them crypto. I was like, this is so dodgy. They were being sued by the Texas securities regulator at that very moment. It hadn't been adjudicated yet. So they're just like still selling people on this thing. And I look over to my left is the CEO, like on this couch. And so, I got a mic up, I got to
You
go over
sit
there.
down.
Yeah, and
Yes.
we have the wildest
Yes.
conversation. And that was our first day. So I was like, well, I got to keep going.
Oh wow, that was the first
Yeah.
day. So tell me about the Celsius story. I think people know. You also talked to Sam Bankman-Fried in the documentary. That obviously blows up enormously. But Celsius in some ways, you know, got less attention, but in some ways is an even more kind of pure distillation of the entire thing. Tell me about the Celsius story.
Sure. So Celsius said that it was better than a bank. It was a way for people to give their cryptocurrency, put it on the Celsius platform, and then they're going to get this guaranteed return. And a guaranteed above market return is literally one of the 7 red flags for Ponzi schemes on the SEC's website. Like it is just one of those things you cannot guarantee above market return. You can't guarantee return, really. You
Right.
definitely can't guarantee above market return. So it was just obviously a lie. And all of these people, these regular people who had made a little bit of cryptocurrency money, so not like money they've converted into actual money yet, but some sort of, money that they couldn't really use unless they were going to cash it out. They're like, oh, well, I'll just park it at this thing that looks like a bank and I'll get this return. And I sit down with Alex Moshinsky is the CEO. He's now in jail, but I sat down with him and he, he just, I mean, just a used car salesman, just like there's a clip in the thing where he's like, I'm asking about fraud. So isn't fraud a problem in the industry? He's like, well, you leave money on the street.
Yeah.
You expect it to be there when you get back.
That's
It's
exactly
like,
what he
it's
says.
like, and I'm like, so it's their fault? And he's like, no, you misunderstand. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. Like the easiest question in the world, like he's like, well, yeah, we don't charge you interest. Like we're going to give you that money back. I'm like, well, how do you make money then? And he was like, no, we just, no, we give it to you. I'm like, yeah, right. How do you make money? And it turned out the way they made money is they were gambling wildly with the money people had given them. And they were, um, manipulating the market to benefit themselves with their own coin called the Celsius coin that they owned a lot of. And they were doing like sort of very typical in crypto, sort of inflating it by selling it back and forth amongst accounts they control and then selling into the regular people that were putting their money on the platform. So it collapsed like just a few months after our interview, and hundreds of thousands of people lost, a lot of money. So a pretty, like to your point, I think it's a pretty vivid illustration of sort of some of the dynamics at play when it comes to cryptocurrency.
That last thing you said, just for people that aren't familiar or, vaguely familiar, I mean, the kind of defining or characteristic form, I think, of manipulation or fraud in this universe is basically, manipulating the trades around a coin to make it look like it's going up in value, or to make it go up in value because you have sort of buyers and sellers, and there's some small group of people on the inside that are doing that. Sometimes just proxies for you, right? And then as it starts to go up, then other people who don't realize, right, they buy into it. Now they have it. They have put actual money into it, and then the sell happens. There's even a term for it in crypto. It's the rug pull, right?
Yeah.
Like that is, am I right to say that's kind of the defining scam? Like just in a basic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a penny stock pump and dump, right? It's
There
the
you
same
go.
thing
Yeah.
that used
Wolf
to
of
happen.
Wall
It's this-
Street.
yeah, exactly. It's the same thing like with Dave, the company that Dave wanted me to invest in, this like company that had supposedly produced synthetic blood, tiny little company. And we put money into it as the price was, of course, going up as some guy was talking it up, and then, it promptly crashed. So it's really just putting new words onto a scam that's been going on in some form or other for a very long time, and probably predates financial markets themselves, just trying to like sort of get people to invest in some sort of scheme that's quote unquote guaranteed to make them money. I think what crypto's sort of ingenious in the way that it uses the English language, because words in crypto it's often the opposite of what they say they are. Like cryptocurrencies that aren't currencies economically, stable coins that aren't stable, decentralized means centralized. You
Right.
can even combine them into meaningless phrases. There is this thing called DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations.
Oh yeah. I remember that
Yeah,
was going to
they
be
don't-
like everything was going to run on people were going to have like entire organizations or like government on the blockchain.
Yes, I had many conversations with guys with asymmetrical haircuts in like 2022 about how DAOs were going to change the world. But DAOs were neither decentralized nor autonomous nor particularly well organized. They just kept crashing all the time, and so they're no longer really a thing. But it really I kept coming back to, why are people doing this? What's the actual sort of human motivation behind it all? And yes, it's a get rich quick scheme for sure. It's also the searching amongst guys for a sense of community, for a sense of belonging. What's so sick about it is that it exists almost exclusively online, right? There's not really a community in real life. And so it's so much easier online to run a scam. It's hard to fake like real buildings and real people that you need to meet in real life. But online, you can fake people, you can fake, a nice website can get you pretty far. And this just kept happening over and over and over again when it came to crypto. So, yeah. So,
That point about community, like that's part of what has been so strange about this phenomenon to me. And I guess it's not that strange because if you look at, televangelist scams, which have, happened throughout the years, and like I was saying, like you were saying, we're around the same age. So like we kind of were children at the sort of peak of a bunch of them, when they blew up. Um, it's easier to it's easier to take people's money. It's easier to have a scam if there's some belief and sense of community attached to it. So it's not just like this is just a transaction. It's like you're part of the future. You're going to be on the right side of history. Like, talk a little bit about the culture and the kind of zealous and fervent sort of belief. Some of whom I think are true believers. I want to be clear. Like, I don't think everyone's cynical in this world, which is part of what gives it power. In the
Yeah.
same way that like televangelists can take advantage of like genuinely pious Christians, right? Because
Yeah.
they really do believe. Like, there's a
Yeah.
mix of it in this universe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the most vivid illustration in the film is when I go to El Salvador,
Yeah.
and the president has said that there's going to be this magical Bitcoin city in the east of the country, which is really in the middle of nowhere. It's like a fishing village,
Yeah.
and they're going to mine Bitcoin from the volcano, and then that's going to like create all of this wealth that's going to result in this city of gold. They had a model built for it that was very like Gaddafi-esque, and and they were also going to build an airport to service this magical Bitcoin city. So I go to the east of El Salvador. There's nobody there. The only resident of Bitcoin City is a gringo, is this guy named Corbin from Illinois.
So
who
good. So
has moved
so
on a-
good.
when Giorgio Angelini, who produced the movie with me, when I found out from my El Salvadoran source that there was this guy named Corbin who was down there as the first resident, I was like, well, we're on a plane tomorrow. Like, we got to be there. So Corbin has moved from the United States. He sort of was going back and forth, but came down to this remote area with this belief in cryptocurrency, and was the first official resident of Bitcoin City, and built a cinder block house, and was sort of living this dream that someday the city would manifest. Spoiler alert, it hasn't. Nothing's happened with it. And meanwhile, they were displacing this whole Salvadoran community to build this airport, which is very strange because they already have an international airport about 100 miles away. The consequences are real. But with Corbin, I think it's fascinating because he's a guy who he's very much working class. He described having had hundreds of jobs he's a young guy, so I think he works construction and various similar fields, and had bought some Bitcoin. Clearly wouldn't tell me how much he'd bought, so I don't know, but was clearly meaningful to him. But was one of the things that was so fascinating. So he uproots his life. He goes there on this dream. And I ask him about the Bitcoin, and I'm like, okay, you won't tell me how much you have. Fine, I respect that. But why don't you just sell it? Why don't you sell it and live now and with whatever money you have? And he just couldn't. He can't sell it, because to sell it would give up on the dream, And in the Celsius case, I interviewed a bunch of victims of that Celsius scam to understand them, to bond with them. It was all men. They all had different reasons for it. A lot of them are quite sweet, like a guy who had a young daughter and was working construction and wanted to just like spend more time with his daughter.
Yeah. He was like,
and
I want to get passive income and be able to like work a little less and hang out with her more.
Yeah. And like, I feel like I let her down now. And you're like,
Right.
oh my God, like I'm crying, you're
Right.
crying, everybody's crying. And you come back at the end to those guys and ask them, do you still believe in cryptocurrency? Some of these guys have lost their life savings, and they all, to a man, said yes. They all believe in it. We're talking about, I really hesitated to use this word for many years, but I do think it's applicable. It's a cult on the smallest hardcore group, like 5 to 6% of the population. It's a mainly dudes that believe that this thing is going to make them rich, but also just sort of give them purpose, I guess, in many ways. And then there's another 10% of the country that's like fiddled with crypto. And then there's 80+% of the country that's never messed with it. And I kind of made the film for those people, for the 80% and for the 10% who are maybe open to it. But for the 5 to 6%, my experience is nothing I say or anyone else says is going to be able to convince them that this thing is a scam.
When you there's a great scene where you go to El Salvador after you introduce Bukele, and who calls himself the world's coolest dictator, and of course subsequent to your reporting down there, becomes this key figure in the early Trump administration because he opens his gulag, his sort of abominable human rights violating prison for quote unquote terrorists, to Trump, who sends a bunch of immigrants there, some of whom were like people who had the misfortune of having an autism tattoo for their brother, and who were in there. Anyway, you introduce Bukele, and one of his big shticks is Bitcoin. And you go down to El Salvador, and this happens too when you go to the Bitcoin conference, where you go around being like, "Can I pay in Bitcoin?" And everyone says no. And I love that bit, because the thing to me when Bitcoin starts to get big, and I'm just a genuinely kind of intellectually curious person who also is like, came up at the beginning of the internet. So, and I don't think like, oh, because there's some new digital technology, it's a scam. Like, it might actually be super interesting and awesome. And
Sure.
when people explain the sort of ingeniousness of the Satoshi, who's the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin, of how he sort of created the mechanics of this thing, so you could figure out who owns what at a different point, and you can control how many there are. It's like, oh well, it's kind of an interesting concept. Maybe there's some applicability here. But the thing you keep coming back to is like, okay, what's the use case? And in the case of money, the use case is very clear, because we use it all the time. Like, you pay for stuff. And yes, it's useful. Like, before we started having Apple Pay, very usefully, and all these things, people were using their cell phone minutes to pay in sub-Saharan Africa, and in China they have WeChat, which is their sort of everything app, so they can constantly, some sort of frictionless digital payment system is like, oh yeah, that's obviously a useful thing.
Mhm.
And yet crypto has never been like, you can digitally do that a million different ways with a bunch of different avenues now. The one thing you just can't walk up and buy a cup of coffee with is crypto.
Yeah, and that's really, really funny, right? When a crypto person will like go on and on about the future of digital money, I'm like, oh, you mean like Apple Pay on my phone?
Right.
Like, is that what you mean? Because that works. Because the crypto thing doesn't work.
Right.
One of the interesting things about the Bitcoin story, Bitcoin. Let's talk about Bitcoin specifically here, is that because of the way the code is structured, although it's ingenious, it's really slow.
Mhm. Yes.
Bitcoin can only process 5 to 7 transactions a second. Visa can do 24,000. So it cannot scale as a payments method. You have to build all these layers on top of it,
Exactly.
which defeats the purpose of having this pure system. And even Sam Bankman-Fried admitted that Bitcoin wasn't going to scale ever, and then pivoted to a different blockchain, a coin called Solana, that he happened to own a lot of, and tried to pitch me on that. So, I mean, you just go around and around with these guys, and you're like, I think it's also not, there's true believers and there's hucksters, but sometimes they're the same person. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and everyone's swindling everyone else, right? And thinking they're going to get over on the other guy. It's a really gnarly but hilarious group of individuals.
Well, part of it too is like, there's this reality distortion field thing that happens where you, like, at the peak of it, when it was really blowing up, particularly COVID, I think, which I think you identify as like, people are sitting around, they're inside, they're on their devices. In a lot
They've
of cases,
just gotten stimulus checks,
exactly,
right? They have money in their pocket.
Exactly, because of the government doing the right thing multiple times, both under the Trump administration with the Democratic Congress, and then in the in the Biden years, like, people have gotten money. That part of it is, you would start to feel like you were missing something because the belief was so powerful around you. And then you would also, like, there was periods where it's going gangbusters. Like, I know people who got in early, out of genuine belief. They were kind of like sort of internet anarchist kind of folks, right? And they got in early and made, like, legitimately millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Just from sort of being in the right place at the right time, and not being like part of a scam, and then like prudently selling off to like actually turn it into real dollars that you can then like put into like an index fund and all that stuff, and regulated, in regulated securities. But there is that, you capture that kind of like feeling of frenzy around you and the feeling of like, am I the one missing something or are all these people missing something?
Yeah, and the internet is so effective for these
Yes.
social media platforms of giving us FOMO, right? Which is the new word
Yes.
for greed. It's just greed. It's the same
Right.
thing. It's been around forever, but it's so manipulative. And there's this. Once you click on one story of someone who's made a bunch of money in crypto, you're going to get fed, thousands of different stories, and you're not going to get fed the stories of the people that lost money. So yeah, it really does take on a life of its own. Yeah, I find the psychology really sort of fascinating. I mean, look, young guys like to gamble, right? That's just a reality. Their prefrontal cortex hasn't fully developed yet. They have a higher
No,
many,
just little
especially.
babies.
Well, kind of. If you look at the
I know, I
science,
know,
right?
I
I mean,
know.
I kind of went down a rabbit hole because I was like fascinated
No,
by.
the risk stuff is like the sort of risk-seeking behavior in young men across time and space and even different cultures is like a very established
Absolutely. I mean,
finding in the literature. Yeah.
they smoke more, they drink and drive more, they commit crimes. Like
Yeah. Yes.
this is just what young men do. We should perhaps reflect on how to help them
Right.
more and not sort of like force them with ads saying gamble, gamble,
Right.
gamble,
Right.
gamble. Matt Damon saying you're a pussy if you don't buy crypto. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
sorry if I
Fortune
can use
favors
that
the
word.
brave. Yeah. Yeah.
Fortune favors the brave.
I had
It's
the same reaction, by the way. You play that, that's a Super Bowl ad, when you play that Super Bowl ad and you play yourself watching it. And I literally like fell off my couch. I had the same reaction as you to like, what is this nonsense?
I remember it's in the book, but Jacob Silverman and I had just started reporting. I reached out to him in like fall of 2021, and we were reporting crypto was going up. And so we were out there saying, this is bullshit, this is bullshit. We were criticizing. The first article was about the celebrities, and we were getting, like, I was getting feedback in my community. When I dropped my kids off for school, like the other dads were like, yeah, nice, nice. I was feeling like good about things,
Right.
but the market kept going up. And then we both love the Los Angeles Dodgers. We're sitting in a bar, kind of nursing our wounds because, like, even though we're doing good work, it's not having any effect. The price just keeps going up. And in the middle of the Dodgers game, Matt Damon's ad comes on. And we're both just sitting there like, oh, fuck,
Yeah.
give me another drink, give me some more nachos or whatever. Yeah, I do think that was kind of like culturally like the apex, right?
Yes, that
Was
Super Bowl, the crypto Super
yes,
Bowl.
the crypto Super Bowl, exactly. When it seemed like every other ad was for a crypto company. And that makes sense. If you think of it as a multi-level marketing scheme or a Ponzi scheme, then obviously one of the elements of that is you need to get more and more people in to keep the thing going. So at its height, you're going to get the most famous people in the world to shill for you. You need the biggest microphone, megaphone in the world. But then, of course, at some point you run out of fools, and the thing collapses.
This point about sort of risk-seeking behavior, which is going to be there. I mean, part of the way that we deal with that, right, is that we have regulations so that it's not just a buyer beware universe. And one of the interesting dynamics that you kind of return to thematically is this kind of connection between the financial crisis and the crash, the cynicism and betrayal and lack of trust in the financial system that comes out of that. And then that as like the fertile soil into which the seeds of all this get planted.
Yeah, this crypto story is very simple. The regulated system sucks. Everybody raises their hand. Yeah, we all agree on that. They all have different reasons for it, but like everyone is unhappy with the status quo. And then it says Bitcoin fixes this. It's literally a meme, Bitcoin fixes this. And it's the second part that's obviously the lie. But the first part is worth really thinking about, because if crypto's the lie, then why is it such a popular lie? Why are people really buying this story? It's because we know the regulated system is deeply flawed and deeply unfair, and a lot of the same sort of information asymmetries and potential for market manipulation you actually see in the regulated market. It's just that crypto takes it even further and does this like bizarro version, which is even more extreme than our current market. But I in terms of how to treat these things moving forward in terms of regulation. My personal opinion is the speculative cryptocurrencies, which is anything where the price can go up and down, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Fartcoin, Melania Coin, Cumrocket, all of them. Cumrocket's my favorite. They are, sorry, I have to bleep that out.
Honey, I have some news.
We did it.
I'm putting our...
We made $1 million in Cumrocket, but I can't sell because that would just be giving over. No. Yeah. Invested in Cumrocket and lost. All the speculative cryptocurrencies need to be regulated like securities. It's a very weird thing that they're regulated like commodities, or it's sort of weird. It's understandable because regular currencies are commodities, but because they don't behave as commodity as real currencies in real life for all the reasons we've talked about, it's weird to treat them like that under the law. That's not what people are using them for. They're not using them to, criminals are using them for payments, but regular people are using them to gamble on, to hope that the price goes up or down. So regulate them like securities. The crypto industry really doesn't want that, because
that would be it would probably be it would be the end of the crypto industry as an industry. I don't think it would be the end of cryptocurrency.
Yes.
But I think it would be the end of the kinds of people who are at the conferences that you go to in the film.
Yeah, because they want to recreate a financial market, except without those pesky laws,
right?
Without those laws that regulate how investment, and securities laws are predicated on disclosure. You need to know, in essence, who you're giving your money to and what they're doing with the money. And crypto obviously really doesn't want that. So they've been fighting tooth and nail to have the CFTC in charge. And there's a bill that's waiting to be passed in Congress called the Clarity Act that would do that. But on the securities side, on the speculative side, it's creating like securities for these things called stable coins. And stable coins are cryptos where the price is at least theoretically stable and they're pegged 1-to-1 with a real US dollar. For those things, that's really black market money. That's being used for an enormous amount of criminal activity. Last year, a company estimated $154 billion of criminal activity was facilitated, and it's primarily through stablecoins. $154 billion in a year. It's a staggering amount of money. It's things like Russian oligarchs selling sanctioned oil to the Chinese via crypto in exchange for drones that they can send to Ukraine. The tankers that are going through the Strait of Hormuz right now are paying, apparently.
That's how they're paying,
Yeah, in crypto, so that the Iranians can get around the banking system. So you can, of course, use crypto for good, right? Like there are counterexamples where I heard about a woman in Afghanistan who's an entrepreneur, and she can't get banking under the Taliban because she's a woman. And so she pays her employees in Bitcoin and runs her business in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. Right. And I don't know if that specific example is true. I heard that secondhand, but I have heard other stories, and there is some truth to that. But if you're going to acknowledge that, you have to acknowledge the bad as well. And you have to, as adults, I think we should consider the relative size of each of the markets, let's say. And the criminal market is, I think, just dwarfs what good people are using it for.
Well, to come back around to like, what's the use case, and can I use crypto to buy my coffee? Like, that is the one use case.
It's gambling and crime.
Right. Like and it is very effective for that. And again, if for all the reasons that we were saying before, that it doesn't make sense to buy a cup of coffee, if you can't use real money or don't want to use real money, and you want to do a transaction that's going to make both parties a lot of money, but want to keep it off, you're willing to deal with the hassle and friction and all the stuff that comes from dealing in crypto for the benefit it confers, which is that no one can see it and you can get away with it.
Exactly.
So that's why it's like water finding its level. Like that has to be, in some ways, the ultimate use case. It sort of can't but be that, because of precisely what a pain in the ass it is to use as a payment system in any other environment.
Yeah, and if you're laundering money, my understanding from money laundering is you're accustomed to pay a certain vig to get your money clean. Right. Like it's a cost of doing business. You're gonna, you're gonna bite that cost, because on the other side you have clean money that you can actually spend. Right. And crypto is really, really good for that. The ties to these stablecoin companies to our current administration are really shocking.
Let's talk a little about that.
Yeah, so Tether is the largest stablecoin company by far. It's insane. So they say they're backed by $200 billion of real money, although they have had to pay a fine in the past to the New York State Attorney General for lying about that. They had to pay a fine, and I forget what year it was, but relatively recently. So who knows if they have the real money? But Tether is really the crypto of choice for criminals because it's transferable. It's a one-to-one trade. It's supposedly backed by dollars, and it becomes this sort of digital hawala system. If you know that sort of Southeast Asian, it's like a way of sending something of value that doesn't actually touch real money. You're sort of like
Okay.
it's sort of like an honor system or a trust system that's been
Okay.
set up, although amongst criminals in this case. And Tether, they have all of this money, right? They supposedly have $200 billion. Well, their broker is Cantor Fitzgerald, which is Howard Lutnick's firm. So our commerce secretary is sort of or his sons now, I guess, technically, are managing the money for this massive stablecoin company, which is the primary instrument of criminal activity in cryptocurrency. I mean, that's where we are. It's rough.
And the president has his own stablecoin.
Yeah.
Which has, and then his wife has a coin, and then there's a whole bunch of other sort of associated businesses. They, the head of Binance, who was running an exchange that the federal government said was basically being used for money laundering for all sorts of entities, including the Iranian Guardian Council, right? And Hamas, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and all sorts of other entities, was pardoned by Donald Trump after giving a bunch of money to him. I mean, of all the industries that they're kind of cozy with, I mean, it seems like crypto is actually the central one in some ways, and particularly when you think about the wealth that they particularly have earned. That does seem to be mostly Donald Trump is a crypto entity now, if you look at the pie chart of his holdings as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's billions of dollars. It was that $500 million investment from the sheik in the UAE that, he puts $500 million into Trump's stablecoin, and Trump guarantees they get the NVIDIA chips and they get CZ, the former CEO of Binance, pardoned as well. CZ is now operating out of the UAE.
We should note, just for standards reasons, that there's a tremendous amount of reporting that both parts of what you said are true. I mean, that's established in the record.
Oh, right.
We can't say that it was explicitly a quid pro quo. Both the quid and the quo are established. Whether one was done for the other is
fair enough. I mean, to cite another example, Trump very publicly held a dinner for, if you were one of the top investors in his coin.
So perfect.
You could go to his country club.
While he's president.
He's the president.
He's the president.
Now, if that isn't payment for access, I don't know what we're right. Like, the only difference between literally handing him the money is like, oh no, we converted it into a quote unquote cryptocurrency.
That's exactly right.
It's like, okay.
If he was at the front, if he stood in the door with a bag of
a kava bag
of his golf, yes, exactly, of his golf club, and you put the envelopes in, the wedding in The Godfather. Then if you did that, I think we probably would have crossed some line. But take away the bag, and you basically that's what you're getting.
Yeah, and to your point about how much money he's made specifically in crypto versus all the other corruption, all the other stuff he's also doing, it's so much easier to scale the crime in crypto because you don't have to deal with pesky physical dollars or anything else.
And this is why it's so sort of inevitable, like the water finding its level, that Trump and crypto come together. I mean, because and the other part of it too is that the structure of the con is exactly the same. The Trump con and the crypto con, to go back to what you were saying before about people's distrust of the financial system, people, the in some ways, low trust folks can be some of the best marks.
Absolutely.
Right? Everyone else has failed you. it's all a lie, it's all rigged.
Yep.
People have that feeling because of rational conclusions they've drawn from their experience.
Mhm.
Can be very susceptible to the the sales job of I'm going to come along. I'm the one who's outside the system.
Yeah.
And in that ways, they're almost structurally identical. The crypto sales pitch and the Trump sales pitch.
Yeah. And I mean, for the rest of us, we can see this president who is himself a convicted fraudster, right? Like 34 counts, New York jury.
Right.
Judgment, I understand the amount is thrown out, but the judgment stands.
Yep.
And he's selling you on this fraudulent coin that was supposedly set up in opposition to the evils of the government. I mean, the irony is just
as the president of the United States.
The United States. It's just like,
that's true. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Wall Street firms are profiting from it by facilitating trades like, the ETFs, these exchange traded funds. BlackRock is like taking your money and then going to the crypto exchange and saying, oh, this money is meant to signify a certain ownership of Bitcoin. You hold the Bitcoin. All they're doing is facilitating the trade. But the democratized, decentralized future of money brought to you by BlackRock is, come on,
right.
What are we talking about, right? This is ironies within ironies within ironies.
It is, although what's also interesting is like there has been a lot of Wall Street skepticism of Bitcoin. And one of the things, the other way that I think these are structurally similar stories, right? And you talk about this in the film is like, yes, the regulated financial markets are messed up in a bunch of ways, but also it could be worse. They also do in the same ways of like Donald Trump is like, yes, the corrupt campaign finance system is messed up. And it's like, yes, you're right. You want to see a really worse alternative? It's like whatever your critique of the status quo is, of how rigged the system is, if that's money and politics in one hand or the financial system, which are all critiques of which are true.
Yeah.
You can come up with a much worse version. And in both cases, Donald Trump and crypto are like the worst version of Wall Street and like pay for play politics.
Absolutely. Completely corrupt. And I want to point out something that's often overlooked when we're talking about crypto. The advocates will say, well, the money doesn't come from the government. We're freeing money from the dead hand of state. Well, if the money doesn't come from the government, where does it come from? The crypto companies, the crypto industry doesn't like to talk about it, but the answer when it comes to cryptocurrency is corporations.
Yeah.
Right. It's World Liberty Financial, Donald Trump, and it's also Bitcoin. The Bitcoin that are mined now the majority are mined from multi-billion-dollar corporations, many of which are publicly traded. So we're talking about private money, right? Money that's not in the public's hands, but in the hands of issued by individuals and corporations. And if corporate money seems like a good idea to you, then Godspeed. But I hope for most of us, that sounds terrifying. And we have actually tried it before.
Yes.
In the 19th century, we had what was called the free banking era, which is also known as the wildcat banking era. And banks were allowed to issue their own notes, their own currencies. And you were allowed one chapter for your bank. And so you would set it up, in many cases, as far away from your depositors as possible, where the wildcats roamed. And once you had the real money, what's to stop you from taking off with it, right? So there was a lot of fraud. There was a lot of instability, just generally speaking. It just didn't work very well. And so
we had multiple Great Depressions, essentially, in the 19th century, as the system would sort of boom and bust and crash.
Right. And ultimately, the decision was we really do need a central bank, right? We really, if money is this fiction we've created, what is it? I talked about it in the film, but it's trust, right?
Yeah.
It's trust, not in me handing you a dollar bill and trusting you, Chris Hayes. It's you take the dollar bill from me because you know you can use it. And so it's a trust in this system that we've created. And the only way we've been able to figure out how to do that, really for millennia, is the money coming from the state. Before it was, the emperors and the dictators. Now it's the supposed democracies that we live in.
Right.
But that's the only way to scale the trust, because if they're all social constructs, money, government, religion, they're only as strong as the social consensus that underlies them. And one of the things that's interesting about crypto is it really has taken off because of this fracturing of the consensus, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this
Mm-hmm.
small cohort of people, this 5 to 6% of the population. I'm not saying they're all MAGA, but there's definitely a lot of overlap. And they are really disillusioned with the system. They're really angry and they feel like they've been screwed over because they have in many cases. And then it's much easier to sell them on the story. It's a classic con man tactic, right? Is pick a mutually agreed enemy to form an emotional bond with your mark, and then manipulate the mark by asking him to give more and more money to fight against this evil enemy. And Trump is just, really, really good at that. But of course, he's conning his own people, as he always is, which is quite sad.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of this story to me is what I sort of alluded to in the intro, and what you talk about in your book, and is that this crypto story, like, to me, I think we've passed peak crypto in terms of crypto frenzy and the crypto Super Bowl and the amount of money that's going into it. But now, in some ways, there's just a bunch of other cryptos. Like, in some ways, I think, like sports gambling, which is, enormous growth. There's ways in which I think it's probably superior, in the sense that, like, you can't control whether the Dodgers win or lose. Like,
Right.
it's a little less amenable to the kind of outright fraud that, say, Celsius was accused of, where you're like, pumping and dumping, right?
Mhm.
But this sort of sense of, like, that the only way to get ahead, and where, like, all the free dollars go, and the sources of growth in all these industries, right? It's like, in the same way that you had the crypto Super Bowl, it's like every ad now is sports gambling, and
Yeah.
every podcast is sponsored by a sports book.
Yeah.
And now it's Kalshi and Polymarket, and they're throwing tons of money around, and they're hiring ex-politicians. And again, it has that same feel. It's not structurally similar, because, again, when you're betting on independent outcomes, those are kind of the outcomes, and gambling's been around forever, and sports books have been around forever. So it's not
Right.
like, but I'm just curious what you think of, like, what is it about our society right now that this seems to be such a golden age for this kind of scammy, get rich quick, like, gambling culture?
I That's a good question. I think that one of the ways in which we've sort of kept gambling on the sideline and sort of outside of, let's call it, polite society or whatever, is that you made it a little bit more difficult to place the bet,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, friction.
You had
Yeah.
to friction. You had to go to a bookie to place the bet unless you were in Vegas. And so you had to fly to Vegas to place the bet. And under the auspices of, in some ways, democratizing, decentralizing the ability to gamble on things, we've made it so easy to gamble that we are almost daring young men not to gamble. We're giving them so many different stimuli, saying you got to buy, you got to buy, you got to gamble on everything from the prediction markets to sports gambling to crypto. That's easily regulated, in my opinion, right? It's an advertising question. Like, you just need to treat
Totally.
it like cigarettes and alcohol, hard
Yeah,
alcohol, you
you
know?
don't have to, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, it's
No.
such a classic American thing. Like, it's like, oh, we have, it's like our Baptist bootlegger, duality, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, gambling's all legal. And then you would go to other countries and it would be legal. There'd be like there's a bunch of countries throughout Asia and Europe where gambling was legal. So it's like, here it was like illegal. And now it's like, not just illegal, but like, you have to, like, log into DraftKings to drop your kid off at school, or like whatever, like, insane ubiquity that we're, like, dealing with now.
Well, now that, because the leagues are in on it, because there's now
Right.
official betting sponsors of this or that league, it's a part of their bottom line. And so it becomes
Yes,
even harder
exactly.
to like, to disentangle. But I do think, I really think some reasonable legislation needs to be passed to just provide some safeguards for people, and to just, again, like, give you a little bit of friction so
Friction.
you
I
don't
totally.
have to,
Yeah, and I think the friction thing to me is also a big part of this story. Like, it's a big part of the crypto story too, because when crypto started, like, when I'm talking about the people that I knew that kind of got in early,
Mm.
there weren't apps. Like
Right.
it was a way of sort of off weird thing that you had to like go through a bunch of steps, you know, to kind of
Yeah.
acquire, and you had to like kind of be read in on. Um, you know, I had this experience that I keep thinking of. It was like a summer or two back where I was like in a bar by myself, just having a drink, I think after work. And this guy was sitting next to me at the bar. He was like a young man, probably, you know, 27 or whatever. And he was getting like tuned up, and he had his phone, and he was going on his phone between basically his sports bets, his crypto coins, and like his Tinder. And it was just so perfect. This little window of like the male loneliness crisis.
Yeah.
He's just
Right,
there, and it's
right,
like
right, right.
he's a few drinks in, like here's all this like frictionless, just like I'm watching
That's right.
these games. I've got this parlay. Is my parlay coming together? Who's messaging me on Tinder? Oh, which of my crypto coins is?
Yeah.
And all of it was right. Like there was no friction, right? For
Yeah.
all of it, whether it was the human interaction of like trying to find love, whether it was like trying to
Or
make
something
money.
else.
Right,
Love,
right. Yes,
you know,
yes,
whatever.
yes. But like, yes, exactly. But it was like, I think if you, I guess my point is, I think if you took the phones away and you took the apps away, we wouldn't have the size of crypto that we have. Like
Oh,
it's
definitely.
like
Yeah.
it being there to do while you're waiting online to get coffee is such a huge part of why it is what it is.
Yeah, and much like the online gambling, well, all gambling markets really, like a very small number of customers really provide them with an
Yes,
enormous amount of
exactly.
revenue, and it's
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
addicts, right? It's the
Yes,
people that are
exactly.
addicted, and now you're creating a market, or you have a market where there is no off switch. Like the crypto markets operate 24/7, not like the regulated financial markets, and they're gamified and all these things. And so for people that have for that small percentage of the population that develop gambling addictions, this stuff is like crack cocaine. It's really, really bad. I don't go into it in the movie because there wasn't time, but in the book, Jacob and I interviewed a husband and wife team of
Yeah.
addiction experts that cover all sorts of addictions, and gambling addiction is one of them. And they talked about in the last bubble when it blew up, how all of a sudden all these guys were coming in, and it was everywhere. It was you know, doctors who had gambled away the family's life savings. It was young kids who were gambling away their minimum wage paychecks on crypto, and the parents were coming in and saying, "How, you know, help us with this." And so there's real social cost to that stuff, right? And I think, you know, it's a real shame that those stories really aren't told very much, because there's so much. Men have such shame about these losses, you know, and we're so uncomfortable talking about mistakes that we've made, and they're trying to make it more difficult for us to share, right? They only want to celebrate the wins and not talk about the losses. So anyway, something I try to talk to my kids about. I have a 12-year-old boy, and his friends are now talking about cryptocurrency, which is terrifying. And I'm trying to explain. I mean, you know, he's seen my movie, he's briefly in my movie,
Right.
and
Yes.
he's
Yes.
still like, it's a hard. So it shouldn't just be my job or your job or the parents' job to have to individually restrain our children. It should be, you know, the government has a role to play here with some reasonable legislation.
Right. And you do see it. I mean, I've seen, you know, you see kids talking about crypto, you see kids talking about sports gambling, like, again, because it's so ubiquitous. It's always boys. What is that part of it? I mean, it's sort of maybe end here, but okay, right. Risk profile, risk seeking behavior. That's part of it. But I think the sort of gender dynamic here, the shame part of it, the kind of sense that your money or your paycheck stands in for your sort of worth as a man.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a route to being, you know, both in a sort of tangible material sense. You want more money so that you can work less and spend more time with your daughter, but also that number next to your name and face is like what stands in for your value. But also on the backside, the shame of it, which I do think also, again, is very structurally similar to the Trump thing. It's very hard to be like, I got,
Yeah.
I got swindled, I got hoodwinked, because that's dishonorable, that's vulnerable, that's, you know, that's giving up some part of yourself and also your sort of sense of yourself as a man.
Yeah.
That then is such a useful tool in the con, right? Of keeping
Yeah.
people locked in.
Yeah, the ultimate, what you really want to do, one of the things you want to do if you're conning people in the long con is you want them to blame themselves when
Right.
things go wrong. And crypto's really good at that. It has all this terminology like DYOR, do your own research, meaning like if you screw up and you lose the money, that's on you, buddy.
Right.
And it does a lot of that stuff. So the blame gets refracted back onto the marks themselves, which is really, really sick. But it works so well because of how the conception of masculinity, this sort of toxic conception that's been created. And I do worry about that, I think it's ironic if people had an easier time having money or having at least services provided to them, having a social safety net, they wouldn't need to engage in this behavior
Totally.
and the conception would slowly, evolve away, I hope, into a more mature version of that, of what
Or a
masculinity
sense
is.
that, there's a relationship between effort and reward, and that if you worked hard and you were willing to work and had a good attitude and that you could make enough money to do the things that you want to do in life, which I think that idea is just like so
Yeah.
eroded.
Yes.
Everyone's sort of looking for their version of landing in that small set of people that are going to make it out okay,
Yeah.
and once you set that up as the structure of the kind of game of life that is American capitalism, whether the version of that is my kid's got to get into Harvard or some elite school, or I want to get the next crypto coin, all of it is about scarcity and all about like only 10% of people are going to get off this boat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like once that's the structural psychology for everyone, even if it's the sort of meritocratic version of like going to tutoring so your kid goes to school, it's still structurally about some small group is going to make it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, maybe, some of that is perhaps, unavoidable, and maybe even
Yeah.
the fact that you're pushing your kids hard to get or one is pushing their kids hard to get an education is not
Right.
bad in and of
No.
itself. But yeah, I mean, to me, whatever, we can go off on a whole other tangent, but I don't understand why billionaires exist. Like, I feel like we could imagine there's a wealth tax that Elizabeth Warren has, but just go slightly farther, which is if you have $1 billion, you get to keep it. Congratulations. You have planes and houses and
Right, right.
boats, and you never have to work a day in your life, and you can live off the interest. But after that, you're taxed at 99.95%.
Yeah.
And not only can we do a lot with that money, but what you're using your money for after that $1 billion is buying shit you don't need,
Right.
and using it to maintain power and corrupt our democracy. So it's a negative for all of us. So I if there's any positive to how horrible the age we're living in is, perhaps the Overton window has
Yeah.
shifted on both sides so that we can,
Totally.
if the Dems get back into power, we can do something meaningful. But I do worry that as the disparities get larger and larger and the pace of technological change speeds up, the differentiation between the winners and the losers is just more and more extreme. And the only way to regulate that in some ways is to put a cap on sort of wealth, right, at some point.
Yeah.
Or it just continues and gets worse and worse with each passing day. Anyway, what a lovely note to end our podcast on.
Ben McKenzie is a director, actor, and best-selling author. He's co-author with Jacob Silverman of the New York Times bestseller Easy Money, and he just made his directorial debut with Everyone is Lying to You for Money, which, again, I really, really highly recommend you check out. That was a great conversation, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris.
We should note that while multiple leading blockchain analytics firms have reported that Tether accounts for the vast majority of illicit stablecoin activity, and that the U.S. Office on Drugs and Crime explicitly highlighted Tether as a major vehicle for money laundering and underground banking, Tether itself has publicly disputed claims that they are the primary stablecoin used for illicit activity. They responded back in 2024 to that UN report, saying that the UN had ignored the traceability of Tether. They also point to the scale of illicit activity powered by Tether as a, quote, drop in the ocean compared to similar activity through the traditional banking system. Additionally, Tether claims they have integrated the FBI into their system to now monitor transactions.